New York's classic rock, Q1043.
Well, this is a first for me. The first time I am interviewing my big boss, Bernie Weiss. He is the president of iHeartMedia New York. And the reason that I asked him to join our show is that he has written a book called Ace It: How Sales Champions Win New Business. I did not, in all transparency, Bernie, I did not get through the whole book. However, what I have read, I have to say, is an absolute detailed how to, if you want to become a great salesperson or a great account executive. So if you're just tuning into the show and maybe you're in sales, and it doesn't have to be radio sales, if you're in sales or if you are thinking of making a career switch, and so many people are these days, and you're considering a career in sales, this is a book you need to, it's an absolute how-to manual. Just across the board. All right, Bernie, did you grow up wanting to be in sales?
I absolutely did not. And first of all, good morning, Shelley, and thanks for having me on. I never thought to become a salesperson until I was in my late 20s. Actually, I started marketing. I started finance in college. I became a management consultant for the first few years of my career. And then as I was 27, 28 years old, I suddenly started to feel, to really make a difference for a company and the company's revenue, you got to know how to sell. And at that point, I started working for a media company. And my boss back then told me, hey, if you want to make it in media, unless you're on air like you are, the only other way to really have a good career here is to know how to sell advertising. And that's how I got into advertising sales. And that's how it happened. And like you just said earlier, so the book is really for anyone who's interested in sales. So it could be a college student who is maybe thinking about, okay, what's my career choice? What's my first job? They will get a very good idea what it's like to be in a sales role, similar to someone who is maybe already 15, 20 years into their career and they're thinking about a career change and want to get into sales at that point. But then also for the sales veteran who just needs a shot in the arm, and then also for sales managers who are already managing a sales team and just need a process and need a model and a framework that they can follow along. So there's really several different audiences that I had in mind when I wrote the book.
How does somebody know if they have the potential to be a great salesperson?
Yeah, that's a great question that I always get, and I want to answer it maybe a little differently by first starting to talk about what it's not. A typical interview with a college student, when I have one, I usually ask them, why do you want to be in sales? And the first answer I get many times is, well, I'm so outgoing, I'm so social, I'm good with people. And the reality is that is good to, it's not a bad thing to be that, but there's so many other things that actually play a role in becoming a good salesperson. And those things are very different traits actually that most people think about. It's about being disciplined. It's about being able to creating a routine and a process and really follow that process in a very disciplined fashion. It's about becoming an expert in the client's business and to be really customer centric. And as a matter of fact, many good salespeople are introverts. And that's always so interesting to me because that, the picture that many people have from the stereotype is like this outgoing, natural born salesperson. And the reality is, and you might know that from our team here in New York, the best salespeople are many times introverted. They're just really, really good following their sales process. And that's what's always been so interesting to me. And that's also what's being covered in the book. And what that means is that many, many people can actually learn to be really, really good in sales, as long as they are staying focused and disciplined and are following the sales process. And if they follow every single step in that sales process, they're just maximizing the chances to make a sale.
It's really interesting. I know you're a tennis freak. Did you almost go pro, by the way?
I almost did. Yes, I wasn't good enough though. I would have starved to death. I'm glad I'm glad I found that out early.
But anyway, you liken a good salesperson to John McEnroe's style compared to Yvonne Lendl's style. So explain, because you would think
It's
John
actually the
McEnroe,
opposite. So the good salesperson is more like Yvonne Lendl.
right?
And because McEnroe, and now that we're just past the U.S. Open and McEnroe is always on TV, people will remember him as a genius, a tennis genius who was improvising, had a great feel for the ball. He already knew where the ball would go before his opponent actually hit the ball. Like he just had this sixth sense of being this genius on the court. And his biggest nemesis back then was Yvonne Lendl, the Czech player, who was considered to be pretty boring, to be honest, because he was just following a system. Every single point the guy played was constructed in a very similar way, and he just broke every single point down into these mini steps that he followed, and he knew that if I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this, I'm going to win the point. And you can think about McEnroe as this natural born tennis player, and Lendl more as a systematic tennis player. Maybe less fun to watch, but extremely successful. And my point in the book is salespeople will be more successful by following more the route of an Yvonne Lendl and having the sales process that they can follow day after day after day.
How did you come up with this process? And like I said, if you read the book Ace It, How Sales Champions Win New Business, Bernie Weiss takes you through this step by step. So it's virtually a complete how-to manual. But
yes,
how did you come up with these steps?
Well, I lived them myself. So when I moved here from Austria, and again, I hadn't been in sales at that point for too long, and I started selling for Power 105.1, a hip hop and R&B station. Now, I'm a rock guy. I'm
Right.
wearing a CBGB T-shirt, so I didn't really know anything about hip hop and R&B. And as I started to sell, I tried different things, different ways, and saw what worked and didn't work, and just slowly started to develop this process. And then when I became a sales manager, was really teaching this model and this framework and these templates to my staff, and again, adjusted it over the years. And that's really what the book is about. I tried to make it as accessible as possible, easy to follow along, easy to apply. I use a ton of analogies in the book, a ton of stories like the Lendl McEnroe story. So there's a ton of templates in there, tons of scripts. People can literally just copy and paste for their own sales position, sales job. And that's really what the book is mostly about. And I think the one thing that's worth mentioning is I created this fictional prospect in the book. And what makes, or at least what I'm being told, the book easy to follow along is that we're covering theory, chapter after chapter, going through this process. Then at the end of each chapter is this fictional prospect, and we show how we actually apply the theory in practice. And that just brings the process and all these sales steps to life in an easy way for the reader, I believe.
I'm speaking with Bernie Weiss. He's my boss. He's my big boss. He is the president of iHeartMedia New York. And I'm speaking to him because he has written a book. It is a how-to manual if you are in sales, if you want to improve your sales, if you are thinking of going into sales, if you're thinking of a career change and saying, maybe that, you will be interested in the book Ace It. Okay, let's talk about leads, because I have an interesting aside to your story of how to create a list of leads. How do you do this? Explain this.
Mm-hmm. So the biggest mistake, at least in business to business sales, which this book is really mostly focused on, biggest mistake salespeople make is that they actually have too many leads. They're not qualifying leads enough. So they're chasing sometimes hundreds of different leads and don't know if the particular company they're going after is actually the right company to do business with. And what the best salespeople do is they actually focus on a very finite list of leads and then go really deep, make sure that they are fully researched on that particular company, that they know more than just one person there. And then because of that depth of knowledge that they create with that lead, have a much bigger chance to, number one, set up the meeting in the first place, which is very hard to do. One of the toughest steps in the sales process is to get time with a prospect and to get them to give you time. But because they are so customized and so client-centric and customer-centric, they are able to do that. And that's because they just don't spend their time on hundreds of different leads. They just have a very small list of prospects they are going after in a much more researched fashion.
But you go into it even deeper. You have basically a certain percentage of this would be the dream catch, or this would, it's different levels.
Yes, you'd always want to prioritize. It's a great point, Shelley. You always want to prioritize your leads. If you, let's say, have 25 prospects, you want to have those dream leads, usually 3, 4 max, that you know, if I can close this particular company, that particular prospect, it will change my career, it would change my year. I will hit every single quarterly budget that is being put in front of me. And because of that, I'm going to do everything humanly possible to get in the door with that particular prospect. And then you have other categories that are a little bit lower in terms of priority, and you might not be as focused on those, but you still obviously work them and go after them. But yes, prioritizing leads is a very big deal. And then number 3, talking about prospecting, is really to focus on a vertical. You know, from our sales team here at iHeart in New York, we have specialists that are really focused on automotive. We have specialists that focus on healthcare. We have specialists that focus on sports betting. Or even geographically, we have specialists that focus on Long Island. They will never step foot into New Jersey, but they will know Long Island inside and out and will know all the companies there. So the important thing is really, when you prospect, to have a focus and then to really become an expert in that vertical as well. So
my aside is, I kind of look at my job doing news the same way. If a story has to be told every half hour, the most important stories, I will do maybe 1, 2, or 3 of them each half hour. I have different categories of how many times a story should be used. So I sort of look at it the same way you do with sales. All right, let's talk about
Shelley, one thing you just mentioned, that storytelling is something that good salespeople do really well. And this is where I always feel like the on-air part and the sales part kind of intersects a little bit, because the best salespeople are great storytellers. They don't just go in front of clients with statistics and numbers. They actually create a story around it and then back up, which really triggers the right brain of the prospect. And then they back up the story with numbers where they can then justify it with their left brain. And that's really what the best salespeople are really good at.
Okay, we have about a minute and a half left. What have we not covered that you would like to impart to our listeners?
Well, I do want to mention the book is available everywhere. It's in most bookstores. It's clearly on Amazon. It's on at all Barnes and Noble locations, so it's easy to pick up. It's not a long read, so if you buy it, don't expect to be stuck for 10-15 hours to read it. It's a quick 3 to 4 hour read, 250 pages, and it, from what I'm being told, it reads quickly. And it's like you said earlier, it's not just for media salespeople. It is for anyone who is in a sales role or wants to become a salesperson in any industry, as a matter of fact, that is selling to businesses. It's not selling to consumers, it's selling to other businesses. The book is called Ace It, How Sales Champions Win New Business, by my boss, Bernie Weiss. And if you missed any part of this conversation, download the iHeartRadio app. It is free. And my Sonstein Sunday recordings live on forever as the podcast Sonstein Sessions. And I will see you guys tomorrow morning on the Jim Kerr Rock and Roll Morning Show, Q104.3.
New York York's classic rock. Q1043.